Hello and welcome to What Women Want Today podcast, season 3, the Soul Sister series, where we will tackle tough topics straight from our heart to yours. I'm Terry Kellums, your host and coach for women who struggle to find meaning and fulfillment in midlife.
I am Amanda Keeper. I am your new regular contributor. I come straight from the Midwest, Rockford, Illinois. I'm a public speaking teacher and leadership development professor. I'm also a coach and clinical mental health counselor. I am so thrilled to be here, and let's get started.
Let's do it. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the What Women Want Today podcast. Today on the podcast, I have dating goddess, speaker, author, psychotherapist, and EFT practitioner, Allison Jayne. Allison, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you here with us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Actually, it's not us. It's just me today. My partner in crime could not make it to this one, but that's okay. You and I will have fun without her. So, Allison, I was reading on your blog, you were talking about some point in your towards the end of your marriage where you were folding laundry and you had a moment where you stopped. Can you tell my audience about that moment? Because I loved your article about this so much. Can you tell my audience a little bit about what happened with you that day and where it led you from there?
Yeah. So I was folding laundry and I was watching, I think it was Oprah and which is funny because I'm actually not necessarily, I wasn't a big watcher of that, but I heard her say something there about, are you lying to yourself about what's going on in your life? And I did. It literally stopped me in my tracks. I paused holding the laundry and I just felt it in my body. I felt almost like a gut punch of like, oh, wow, actually, I think I am. And it's been interesting because I had that realization and I didn't even accept it right in that moment. I had that realization and it's sort of like, once you see something, you can't really go back to unseeing it, right?
Yeah.
But it did take me several months before that really sort of gelled and I understood that there were things in my marriage that I was pretending weren't a problem because I just didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to deal with the possibility of divorce. And so I really couldn't look at it at that time. But what I realized as the months went on was actually, I have no choice. I have to, now that this realization is in. And where that has led me since has been honestly a super helpful path because I learned two very important things that day. One, that I am capable of lying to myself. And
I think we all are.
We all are,
yeah.
Right? And that it doesn't serve me in the end, even though it seems like in the short term it does. But almost the more important thing I learned that day was to honestly tune into my body because the body does not lie. The body does not lie. And we can lie to ourselves all we want and stuff down emotions as much as we want. And the body will start to, first kind of gently knock and then start to like hit us over the head with a hammer if we don't listen. And so now I've really learned and going forward and actually getting divorced and becoming single and dating again, I've really learned to rely on my body a lot and to listen to it and to tune in and to feel into, does this feel right? Does this not feel right? Am I being honest here or not? And I think
this is not to be confused with our comfort zone when we're trying to talk ourselves out of like taking a bold step forward because, we're too comfortable where we are. So you're not talking about that at all.
Right. That's an excellent point, actually. Yes. Because sometimes when we are pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, our body is, telling us as well. I think that the way to kind of tell if it's, uncomfortable, I'm sort of deluding myself or lying to myself kind of feeling is if you feel really defensive about it. You know, if
Mm.
you start to, I noticed that when people would ask me about stuff I knew I was lying to myself about, my voice would get kind of high pitched. I would even like tense up like I'm doing right now. I would like lean forward. No, oh, yeah, it's fine. Everything's great. You know, there's these little clues that our body will give us about lying to ourselves. And now that I know that, it's like, darn it, I can't really lie to myself anymore, because when I do, I notice right away and I think, oh God, you know, it's like I might start, with dating. I started dating someone and then I found myself doing that when I was explaining to friends about, oh no, this is working out because A, B, and C. And I was like, oh, there I go. High pitched voice, leaning forward, tensing up. Like, I'm lying to myself.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
good. So how long were you guys married?
I was married for 17 years.
Okay. And so at this point in life, like, do you mind if I ask how old you were when you went through your divorce?
I was 42 when I went through
Okay.
my divorce.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went through a divorce right very close to that age as well. Did you ever say to yourself, like, I don't want to start over again. What I've got is better than what I don't know about, like that kind of, because I think, when you've been married for that long, you're kind of saying to yourself, God, I don't want to date again. Did you find yourself saying like, I don't even want to get remarried. I'll just do this alone.
I have found myself saying that at different points. Yes, yes, definitely. I mean, my situation with my marriage was a little bit different, maybe because we did separate when I was 36
Mm,
and we, worked at it and got back together. But I will say, and that's actually what prompted me to write that blog post, I really was lying to myself, I think, after that. I mean, I couldn't really step fully back in.
mhm.
But I pretended that I could and had and was. And that was what I was lying to myself about.
Sure.
It was a while. It was 6 years that I did that. So I
Wow.
think for me, by the time I really did fully exit, I was actually ready.
Mhm.
Um, in a way,
Yeah.
not at first, because at first I just was so, I think you take that pause, right? You take that recovery time and you just kind of like gather yourself, and when you lose your marriage, you lose your identity
Oh
in a
yeah.
lot of respects, right? And
Yeah.
so it's suddenly like, who am I now? I'm no longer this wife. I'm no longer going to grow old with this person I thought I was going to grow old with. And it's very confusing and head spinning. And I do think it sometimes feels like, whew, this feels easier to just be on my own than to
Yeah.
invest again and
Put yourself
put your
out
heart
there,
back
go
out
through all the
there.
hassle. So I read somewhere that you said that you were dazed and confused by your sudden single status, and you embarked on the dreaded task of having to date again.
Indeed.
So a
Yes,
lot of
indeed.
your girlfriends or women that you were friends with at that point in life were kind of like experiencing the same struggles that you were meeting someone. And I I remember when I was single after my divorce, I went on a date, a couple of dating apps, a couple of different ones, and the people that you meet, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. And so you were having some of that same experience that you were just like, I'm not doing this anymore. There's got to be a better way. Like, tell us how you went from being, you were 25 years as a psychotherapist and an EFT practitioner. Well, tell us a little bit about the EFT practitioner before we move forward. What exactly is that?
Sure. So EFT, it's known as EFT tapping in a lot of circles, and it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is it's a combination of self-applied acupressure and some more traditional, mental health techniques. And
Sure.
so what you do is you focus on and talk about, process through whatever it is that's bothering you
Mm-hmm.
while you tap on your own acupressure points,
Good.
specific points that are meridian endpoints in Chinese medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when you tap on these points in your body, it sends a calming signal to the fight or flight part of your brain, and it kind of shuts off your emotions and
Mm-hmm.
your, fight or flight response.
Sure.
And so your central nervous system can either be in its sympathetic, which is sort of the high, go, 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 fight or flight state, or parasympathetic, which is the relaxed, maybe meditation or shavasana during yoga, like that relaxed brain state. It can't be in both at the same time. It's
Okay.
an on-off switch. It's in one or the other. So if you are tapping on these points, it causes your body to go into the sympathetic. And if you're doing that while you're thinking about something intensely emotional, it's kind of like pouring water on a fiery emotion. It just puts it out.
Okay.
And so what's really cool is your body is sort of forced to create a new neural pathway.
Mm.
So if you're thinking about something upsetting while you tap, suddenly eventually through the tapping, it gets moved from connecting directly to your amygdala, to your fight or flight center, to connecting to your frontal lobe, which is sort of our logic, reason, judgment, calm part of our brain. And so suddenly you can think about the incident and not feel the emotion.
So are you
And
able to problem solve then better at that point?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
because you're accessing the frontal lobe. One thing a lot of people don't realize is when you're emotional,
Mm-hmm.
your blood actually constricts. It drains from your frontal lobe and it all constricts to the mid and hindbrain. And that's, is survivalistic because like if you have to like run, from
Mm-hmm.
a predator,
Right.
then that's what we needed. But nowadays our brains still do that even when there's not an actual threat, but just a perceived threat. And so
Mm-hmm.
when the blood drains from the frontal lobe, you actually can't think and logic and reason very well. It's why maybe, if you ever go to the doctor and they say some things that are concerning, and then you walk out of there and you think, I don't even know what they just said,
Oh,
because
yeah. Oh,
because this is
okay.
what
Yeah.
happens. Yeah, this is what happens. So anytime you're anxious or angry, you are actually stupider, if you will.
So
You're
is
just
this why when couples fight, they don't fight like fair and logically? Like, they just,
exactly. That is exactly right. Right. You literally can't access your logic in that time. So what happens when you tap is it lets the blood flow go back to that part of your brain and you can think better and you can think more clearly. So one thing that's very cool about tapping, aside from just it can extinguish negative emotions, it can get rid of phobias and anxieties and things like that, but it also can help you have insight. So all the time I tap with people and all of a sudden they'll, something will drop in and they'll have this big realization of, oh wait, I see how I can solve my problem now. I can do it this way. And
wow,
that is because you're cleaning out sort of the emotional gunk that was blocking you from being able to access that
that is so
good part of
cool.
your brain, if you will.
That is
Yeah,
so
it's
cool.
amazing.
So
Yeah.
then back to my earlier question, then how did you go from 25 years of psychotherapist slash EFT practitioner to writing a book, becoming a dating coach? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah. So what happened is I was a therapist, a traditional therapist, if you will,
Hmm.
talk therapy for many years. And I worked actually in the inner city of Chicago for children, adolescents involved in DCFS. And I eventually moved out of that and was just doing my own consulting and training. And then I realized that I had kind of forgotten about my continuing education units that I need to get. So anyone who's a licensed therapist needs a certain amount of hours every couple of years. And I, as a self-employed person, completely forgot because used to be I would get them from my employer. And so to be honest, I was completely just in the weeds. I needed like 26 hours in 6 months or something crazy. And so I thought, okay, I'm into sort of mind body techniques. I'm going to try to get trained in one. And I was looking at a couple of different ones. And I simply landed on EFT, no joke, because the Midwest training was in Chicago. And I thought, oh, and in a few weeks from when I realized this. So I thought, okay, great. I'll go to this training and I'll get, 2 whole days worth of hours. This will get me, in a good track for what I needed. And then about a week before the training happened, I got an email with the location, and the location was in my hometown, suburban Chicago, a mile up the street from me. And I was like, wow, that's unbelievable. So then I went, and just about a week before I even went to this training, or maybe 2 weeks before, a dear friend of mine had passed away. And her name was Cindy, and she was from Naperville, and she had passed of breast cancer.
Oh,
And as we were doing introductions that day in the room, a woman 2 rows in front of me said, "Hi, my name is Cindy. I'm from Naperville and I work with breast cancer survivors."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
like that. And, and
Goosebumps.
right? I
Yes.
get every time I tell the story. And I don't even know if I was super into science back then. I am now. But I mean, it was so clear to me that that was a sign that I was in the
Yeah.
exact right place,
You were in the right place. Yeah.
yeah, doing what I needed to do.
Wow.
And I went to the first 2 days of the training and I signed up for the next 2 and I just went and got certified. And so all of that was in 2014. It
Okay.
was before my marriage fell apart. And then, so I started, learning EFT. I started a private practice working with clients doing EFT. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And it's, to me, works much more effectively and efficiently than regular talk therapy. And so I really put all my eggs in that basket. And then when my marriage fell apart, I realized that I knew a lot about working with individuals. I knew a lot about diagnosing individuals' psychology and problems. I didn't know so much about relationships and couples. And just sort of my nature is very intellectually curious. And so I kind of went on a path of, all right, well, I obviously didn't do so well with this in my life. So I'm going to find out everything I can. I'm going to read every book I can on couples psychology and what makes relationships work and what makes things tick. And so I just sort of dove into that and I gathered a lot of knowledge.
Mm.
And in the
And
meantime, I was, the girls jokingly called me the divorce whisperer in my town. I don't really know how that happened.
the first whisperer.
Somehow, I just kept having divorced women sort of show up in my backyard crying or about to be divorced women. And so I just sort of ended up drawing together a group of a lot of single women in my community, and we became good friends and we sort of bonded through this. And so I started imparting some of this knowledge that I was learning about relationships and dating and how all of it can work more successfully. And so the idea began to grow in my head at that point of I should write a book on this because I have
Oh,
lived experience and I
yeah.
have, the background of the
Right.
psychology and all of that to share with people.
That's awesome. And then that led to your speaking from there.
Yeah,
The
exactly. So
communications.
yeah, I had I think I wrote the outline. I know I wrote the outline for the book in 2020 during the pandemic. And I laugh because I thought, oh, I have all this time now in my hands. I'll write a book. I think a lot of us did that, right? Like we thought we were going to do these like great big projects during the pandemic. And then it just didn't happen. And I don't know why it didn't happen because I had a lot of time. But like many of us, we had big dreams that didn't necessarily come true in that pause, if we will. And then it was actually 2 years later, this time last year, actually, that I was having a little bit of anxiety about I'm getting close to turning 50 and I'm kind of having some feelings about that. And I was working with my mentor who I do tapping with, and he was like, well, let's tap on it and let's get into it and let's explore what's going on and what's the stress about it around. And what came out was I had been told my whole life I should write a book, and that I really did want to go into speaking and teaching and all of these things. And that I just felt like it was something that I didn't want to turn 50 and have not produced this thing that I've wanted to produce for so long.
Yeah.
And the beauty of tapping, that was my insight that came in. And then also I just tapped away my fears, fear of being seen, fear of being vulnerable, fear, all the fears that come with when you write a very personal book, as mine is, and you really put yourself out there. Yet I know that that's what people like, because that's what I like. I like those kind of books. So I knew I
Mhm.
didn't want to write the book if I wasn't willing to really, wear my heart on my sleeve and put myself out there. And so I tapped away the blocks and I wrote the book, and 6 months later it was published, and
That's
here I am.
awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. So we talk a lot about purpose and passion in midlife for women. Do you feel like this is your passion and your purpose?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I wrote this in the acknowledgments, so most people probably didn't even see it, but I had like a first love, very intensive love experience in the first guy I dated coming out of my marriage. And it didn't work out and it was very painful. And it was really largely because of that I kept on my quest for I'm going to figure out this relationship stuff. And it was that breakup honestly drove me, I think, to delve even deeper into all of this that I then put in the book.
Hmm.
And so one of my girlfriends had asked me soon after the book came out, she said, do you have any regrets about that relationship after she read, what I put in the acknowledgments? And I was like, honestly, no, because if I hadn't had that heartbreak, I wouldn't have written this book. And
Wow.
this book has fulfilled me so much more than that relationship ever did.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, that's very
It
good.
was
Love
it was
that.
incredible. It was an incredible realization to have,
Yeah,
and
I bet
I
it
feel like
does.
it goes back to I've really come around to things do happen for a reason. And, there's that saying rejection is God's protection, right? Or whatever,
Hmm.
like when things don't work out, if I had stayed in my marriage, if I had stayed in that first relationship, I would not be the person that I am today. And I have
Absolutely.
so much more purpose and so much more fulfillment in my daily life that it was worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about you talk about feminine energy. Talk to us about what that means for you.
Yeah. So this was actually the biggest awakening I think that I had in all my research. And it was the hardest pill to swallow for me because what a lot of is out there on this topic is basically talking about how it's very important in a heterosexual relationship to actually be able to be in your feminine energy for the survival of the relationship most times. And I did the deep dive on it. I found out, okay, feminine energy is all about receptivity. It's about being in flow. It's about honestly rest and rejuvenation. It's about sort of quiet. It's for anybody who's into like yoga out there, it's sort of the yin versus the yang. And
Hmm.
the masculine energy is the just doing, performing, competing, action oriented and giving, whereas the feminine is receiving.
Okay.
So what has become extremely tricky in our society is that the masculine energy is the one that is rewarded and valued. Absolutely, right?
You're
And
making me think of like when I was a leader in a huge corporate five, or what am I trying to say? Fortune 500, not corporate, Fortune 500 company. I was the operations manager for a care center, and like all day long, like it was like the moment you walked in the door, decision, like always guiding people or answering questions or problem solving. And it was funny that the minute that I walked in the door at home, I dropped it completely. Like I was ready to let go of it. And then just, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of kind of that thing, that people joke about all the time, like how a woman never knows what she wants for dinner. Like if your husband says, can I take you out for dinner tonight? And, where do you want to go? Oh, I don't know. I don't care.
right,
I
right.
feel like, when you work in a situation like that as a woman today, you're right. Like that's what's expected, that's what's rewarded. That's, boss babe, woman boss, like all these labels that we have now for women who like really go at it hard. But there is something very restful about letting all of that go at the end of the day and saying, you know what, honey, I don't care what we have for dinner. What would you like? And let's let him make the decision. Damn it. Like,
Let him be in his masculine.
yeah,
Exactly. And so
yeah,
it's really hard, I think, for most women, because most women are operating in their masculine all day, even as a mom, if you're a stay-at-home mom,
yeah,
parenting is very
yeah.
masculine energy. So whether it's in your work or your parenting life or whatever, masculine, masculine, masculine. And so then a lot of women carry that into their relationship.
Okay.
And it can definitely be a relationship killer.
Okay.
I had a friend who was going through a divorce, and her husband said to her, I just feel like you've got all these balls in the air and you're managing them all fine, and you just don't really seem to need me. And I don't know where I fit in.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I think that encapsulates this masculine feminine energy concept so well, because that's what happens. If we are too much in our masculine energy in a relationship with a man, then they do feel like they have no place. They do feel like they have nothing to offer and nothing to give. And unlike us as women, when we are giving, it actually burns us out,
Mm-hmm.
because that's, masculine energy. But when men are giving and doing, that energizes them, because that's in
Mm-hmm.
alignment with their masculine energy. So they want to give to us. They want to be our hero. They want to make you happy. And I always add the caveat that if you're with a guy who doesn't want that, then he's not a good guy, and get rid of him, because 90% of guys do want to do that. So,
Do you think
you know,
feminists listening are shuddering right now? They're
I'm
cringing at
sure
this.
they are. I am sure they are. And I know this because when I was writing the book, I was out to dinner with two very dear friends who are single, and I started explaining this, and they were like, their heads exploded. I was like, what are you talking about? This is so misogynistic, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So here's where I have to back up the truck a little bit and just explain a little bit more about this. So the thing is that why it's important to be in your feminine is for you. It's actually very restful for you. If you can kind of lean back in your relationship and allow the man to be in his masculine and to step up and do for you, that's actually going to be better for you and more restful for you. And here's the other thing that I had to gently ask my friends that day was, but think about it. When you are in your masculine energy in your relationship, what is that really about? Is it about control? Is it about keeping control? Is it about being in control? Because I think that's it.
I'll raise my hand. I
Right?
can recognize that in myself sometimes, that when I'm trying to control a situation, I realize that, and then it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel good to stay in that for very long. It's maybe helpful temporarily, to
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't even know why I think it's good temporarily. Maybe just so that I feel like I'm doing everything I can to make this situation work out the way I want it to work out or whatever. But it
right,
doesn't feel good to stay there for very long. It
right,
feels controlling and bossy and manipulative a little bit, So
right. And
I
I
definitely
feel
get it.
I feel like we've gotten so programmed to be in control all the time that then we do take it into our relationships.
Mhm.
And I do think it doesn't serve us. I do think it can make our partner feel isolated. And so I think it's a problem. Now, the other caveat, though, that I have to say, which is very important, is I am not saying feminine energy is a doormat. That is
Yes,
not,
exactly.
no, 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 no. Feminine energy is about being in flow and receptivity and kind of, but like from a goddessy place, like a high vibe. I am going to let you sort of worship me however you will. And by worship, I just mean maybe make me dinner or fix the, window that was broken, that, whatever, however he wants to show up and step up. Buy me flowers. I'm not going to control what kind of flowers they have to be. I'm just going to receive the flowers. That's the feminine energy, high goddess vibe place. A doormat is somebody who is going to acquiesce to their man all the time. Okay, what
Yeah.
do you want to do? I'll do what you here, I'll cook for you, I'll clean for you. That's actually feminine energy. I mean, masculine energy still, because you're doing. If you're doing a lot
Mm,
for your guy and you're doing all this to please him, you're actually in your masculine energy. And that is also exhausting for you. So
yeah.
the feminine energy I'm talking about is just more of a sort of lean back. I'm going to allow you to step up and be my guy and to treat me like the goddess queen I know I am and see what happens. And most of the time, the guys are going to love that because that's all they want to do. They want to prove to you how much they love you and how much they, adore you and all these things. And so you're giving them the space to do that. But absolutely, you have boundaries and you have limits, and it's not about being a doormat at all.
Or it's not, what was in my head is I could almost hear like a woman with kids saying, does this mean he never has to do anything around the house? It doesn't mean
No,
you have to do all the child caretaking and all of the
oh,
laundry, the
no,
household chores.
absolutely
Like,
not. In
yeah.
fact, I mean, because if you're in your sort of highest, I always call it a goddess vibe in my book, but your highest sort of vibe place, and you're just allowing and you're going with the flow might sometimes be, hey, I need to rest, which means you need to take the kids somewhere,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is, and again, him taking the kids or doing laundry that's masculine energy,
Yeah.
so that's
So
him stepping.
so outside of the marriage relationship, so I feel like you're saying that you have to be in your feminine energy in order to attract the right kind of man into your life. Is that kind of what you're saying?
It is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again,
But how
I
do
think
women
we
do that? Like if you're a
right.
single woman, you're working, you're taking care of everything because you don't have a partner. So how
Right.
does a woman move out of the masculine into the feminine so she can attract?
Right. This is where it's really hard. This is actually, I think, like one of the number one principles that if you get it from my book, you will shift your dating life because we operate most of our day in our masculine. We just have
Yeah.
to. And so if you are finding yourself going on dates and you are the one picking the place and deciding where to go and deciding what to do, making all the decisions, making all the plans. If you're the one online who is sort of the one taking the lead and, asking the questions, asking the guy out, this, that, and the other, you're in your masculine. You are in your masculine. And it is going to be a turnoff to a lot of guys because they want to be in their masculine and they are already feeling crowded out by you before you've even met sometimes.
Wow.
Yeah. So how do you do it? Okay, so this is where it gets hard. There's a couple of things you need to do that are very hard. Number one thing, you need to have faith that the right guy is going to pursue you, and stop getting attached and telling yourself a whole story about somebody's profile that seems great. If they're not pursuing you, they are not your right guy. So you have to
Because
let
the
it
right
go.
man will pursue you. You don't have to pursue him. Even though I feel like a lot of like I won't say women my age maybe, but I feel like we've moved into this whole culture where the younger girls are really doing a lot of the pursuing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And it's going to be interesting to see like how that goes out. And I'm not saying you can never say like, hey, let's get a cup of coffee or whatever. But I'm
Sure.
just saying if you are sort of doggedly pursuing someone, you will turn him off. That is, you just will. It's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I was going to say, I mean, occasionally there are relationships that work where the woman is more in her masculine and the man is more in his feminine. And that can work for some couples. I recognize that. But I've also heard a lot of women in that situation then later get resentful or complaining because they feel tired all the time. And that's the whole thing. You're going to feel tired when you're not in the energy of, where you're kind of supposed to be in your heterosexual relationship.
So you
And
kind of said
so,
it there a little bit, but I want to ask you that question before we move on is so men also go from their masculine into their feminine. Men spend
sure.
time there as well.
Yeah. And they
And,
need to.
and they
Everybody
need
needs.
to.
Yeah. It's like the yin and yang thing. And, there's the little dot of the yin and the,
Black and
the
white,
dot
yeah.
of the yang, right? And there's
Yeah.
the little dot in each of the colors, right? So yeah, everybody needs to operate in both. And men need to sometimes rest and rejuvenate and go with the flow and all of that kind of stuff. But if they get too much of that, what happens is they can get sort of lazy in the relationship. They can
Mm.
get really disconnected and isolate. And so these are the guys that then end up going out and maybe they golf every weekend, for 4 hours and stay at the bar for another 2 to 3, right? Or
Mm.
they watch sports all day on the couch and they don't really interact because they're not being asked to step up and they're not being given space and room to step up.
This is so
You're the one
interesting.
with all of it. I know.
I'm
It's
like
hard.
picturing
Like,
all these different scenarios in my head right now.
I know. And it's hard for me to explain, I think, without people, getting really offended. And so I just always keep going back to just notice, just pay attention to your own body, back to where we started. If you are doing something because you need control, because you're used to being in control, and listen, control makes us feel safe. It is how we delude ourselves that nothing bad is going to happen. It's just an illusion, but that is a powerful illusion. And so if you are used to being in control all the time, you're going to still do that in dating. And it's going to be a turnoff to a lot of guys, maybe not every guy, but a lot of guys. So, and also it's going to feel nice to give up control sometime. If you feel safe with a guy and you can let go of the reins and just kind of lean back in the relationship, it feels really, really great.
Mm-hmm.
We're just not very practiced at doing it. We're just not super comfortable at doing it.
I don't
It's
have a
so
problem with it. When my husband and I want to go on a trip, he's looking at some travel plans right now, and I am totally, totally cool with letting go and letting him do all that. Now, when the time comes, it gets closer to the trip, then I will step back in my masculine and I'll need to probably take charge a little bit, but
yeah. I
I
mean,
don't
and again, we
know.
have to have boundaries. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
say, it's like, I'm not saying always let the guy choose everything you do, but like, give some limits and let him choose. Like, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. I feel like something kind of spicy for dinner.
Yeah.
You can,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
I like that. I
Um,
think that's great advice. You know what I'm thinking of right now. I'll admit one of my guilty pleasures because I spend so much time like learning, reading self-help books, reading business type books, and just learning things about what I do every day. And so when I have some downtime, like if I'm on a vacation or it's just the weekend and there's nothing going on, I love to read trashy romance novels. And you know what is funny about those? Hearing you talk makes me think in every single one of those trashy romance novels, they want the man to be in charge. The woman does. They want
yes.
the man to pursue them. They want the man to, take charge, especially in the bedroom. I'm just going to say
Yep.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. No, I know it's very interesting. I actually, believe it or not, took a class in college because I minored in women's studies,
mhm.
by the way. And I took a class called soap operas and romance novels. And that is
Okay.
actually what we did is we analyze why do these genres have such appeal to women? And that was part of it was because women want some of that, but in our society today, it's sort of frowned upon. And
Mhm.
so it becomes like this secret little shameful thing that we have to
So
feel
true.
ashamed of wanting our guy to be in charge and wanting that,
Yeah.
right? And so I just think the important thing is to just be okay with it, allow it. As long as you have your boundaries and you feel safe, that's the most important thing. And as long as you're
Yeah.
clear in communicating your boundaries, that's the most important thing. But when you're just out there dating before you know whether or not you feel safe, how you can practice this is just by really being in your body and physically moving into your feminine. So what I mean by that is literally leaning back. If you're on a date and you're leaning forward and you're kind of shoulders hunched or whatever, you're coming across as very intense and very masculine. So you might have to like just take notice of that and like lean back and feel your seat in the chair, maybe play with your wine glass or your mug if you're out for coffee, just feel your fingers on that glass. All of that kind of stuff is going to put you back in this flow, feminine receptivity. You're not so worried about what's the next question I'm going to ask him.
Mhm.
You're just, I'm going to go with the flow and I'm going to see what this next question he asks me. And it really shifts the dynamic. It's very appealing to men.
Mhm.
And it also takes you out of any kind of vibe of like, this is a job interview, I'm interviewing you to be my next guy or whatever. It takes you out of the vibe of, I have to be chosen by you. So I have to like lean forward and put on this show for you. No, you're just being you, and you're kind of being your goddessy self and saying, we'll see if you're going to step up. We'll see if you're good enough for me. We'll see if you're, and you're not conveying all that in this snobbery kind of way, but you're just conveying it sort of energetically by being just chill and going with the flow and just waiting to see what happens.
So when you work with women, is it like a program that you take them through? Like, is there like a certain amount of time that this all takes for you to kind of help them? Or how does that work how do you work with women? How does it all work?
So I have an 8-week online course that is part of it is live coaching with me, where we do EFT specifically use the EFT tapping specifically on their own issues. And then part of it is online coursework that we do. And the whole way that I approach this is to kind of say, if you're coming to me, what you've been doing dating wise hasn't been working. And so if you continue to show up the same way, you're going to continue to get the same results.
Right.
And the real key to transformational change is to accept where you are. Stop fighting it. Stop resisting it. Stop trying to force change. Just accept where you are. And then B, go about clearing whatever is in the way of love. Because the fact is love is our natural state. And when you radiate love, you will become magnetic to love. But how do you radiate love if you have all of this subconscious programming against it?
Absolutely.
And that might be programming around, it's not safe to put my heart out there again. It's not safe to be vulnerable again. It might be just programming around, I don't like myself, or constant self-criticism. Whatever the programs are, EFT tapping is like miraculous for getting rid of subconscious programming. It just blows me away on a daily basis how well it works. And so we go through an exploratory process of how to sort of discover those blocks, clear them, adopt in the principles from my book so that you really start to change your mindset around being in your feminine, around being the chooser rather than the chosen, and all these things. And by the end of the 8 weeks, you come out as a much different person. You're showing up as a much different person, and you're going to both see different guys, because actually there's a part of our brain that sees patterns based on what's going on internally. So you're literally going to see new guys that could have been in your gym, in your yoga class next to you the whole time. You didn't even notice them. And B, you're going to attract in different guys, because suddenly they're going to see you, because you are just showing up differently. You're showing up differently.
Yeah. Wow. So this is fascinating. So your book is called Find Love Again. Allison Jayne, thank you so much for being here with us today. Tell everybody where they can find you, where they can learn about your 8-week online course, what your website is, any socials. Let's get all the scoop for the listeners.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the book, the whole title is Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess. Okay. And so they can find me at learntodatelakeagoddess.com.
Okay.
That is where anyone can schedule if they want to chat with me. Also, right now, for your listeners, I'm offering anybody who goes to my website, they can download my ebook for free and check it out. Yeah, so that's kind of a fun little gift.
Yes.
And you can find me on TikTok and Instagram as Allison Jayne, Jayne, Goddess Maker.
Allison Jayne. Say it one more time for me.
Allison Jayne, Goddess Maker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so fun to learn all about this today. I wish you success. I hope the women out there that are listening that are even tiny bit curious about it will go out there and at least get your book and see what that's all about. And yeah, Allison, it was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks. This was really fun. Thanks for having me on.
Take care. Well, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad to be here with you.
And just remember, we're here to serve. Reach out, connect with us on social media platforms, and dig in deeper.
Yes, all those links will be in the podcast show notes. So join us. We can't wait to continue the conversation with you over there. Until next time, everybody, take care.